On the 16th of September 2013, I went to work, normal day, and about 8:10, started hearing pop, pop, pop.
Jennifer Bennet got out of her seat at the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. and prepared to go down the stairs.
When I hit the top stair of that mid-level, there was the shooter. He was standing on the stairs looking up, and when I came to a halt, I was shot.
She was shot at point-blank range and suffered extensive wounds. Emergency physicians called her survival a miracle. In her book, Standing Still, Jennifer recounts the details of that day, her long road to recovery, and how her faith prepared her for that fateful moment.
Well, Jennifer Bennet joins us now. Her book, Standing Still in a Culture of Mass Shootings. Jennifer, nice to have you with us today.
It's nice to be here. Thank you.
That subtitle, In a Culture of Mass Shootings. We are in a culture of mass shootings. Having survived a mass shooting, how do you feel today when you hear that something has happened somewhere again?
Well, I actually watched very carefully for what were the indicators about the shooter.
Uh-huh.
Part of what I talk about when I'm asked to speak is I talk about who is the shooter. Mm-hmm. So for my shooter, mental illness played a significant role.
Seems to be in many of them.
Most of them.
Yes.
Most of them. So not only was that, but the culture he was living in within our building, how we treat each other.
Uh-huh.
Right? So if you're already broken and you're struggling, and then you're in a culture where you're being talked to in a harsh manner, or treated in an unkind way, it helps break you some more.
Well, you just receive it much more intensely than
Indeed.
it was ever intended.
Right, right.
Tell us about your experience that morning. You went to work. It was a day that seemed like it was going to be just a wonderful day as usual. And then you heard the first pop, 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 but you didn't realize that it was gunshots.
That's right. That's right. I did not.
When did you go, whoa, something's not right here?
The second round of pop, 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 it made me get out of my chair and look over the atrium, which went down to the second deck or second floor, looking for the noise.
Yeah.
Because it was an unusual noise. It wasn't the normal clanking of tables and setups. And so that's odd.
Yeah.
That's an odd noise.
So you knew you needed to exit. You chose a stairwell to go down into, and you hit the landing. And as you're coming down and turn, you come face to face with this guy with a sawed-off shotgun. What went through your head?
Actually, I would tell you it was a place of peace. I have security background, and God has made me this way. And I was at peace. 23rd Psalm. I could feel His presence. I don't know how to describe that other than awe. And He kept me at peace. He kept me standing still, and He wanted me to see the man.
And you did. You said in the book that you looked into his eyes. I imagine that was one of those moments that stood still that people write about, where time just kind of stops for a moment. Tell me what you saw when you look into his eyes.
So we did. We stood in what I call the matrix. Everything just slowed down, and I was allowed to see and have the privilege to see the creation of a man that God created just like me. Yeah. His light brown eyes looking up at me, and he was not angry. His face was calm. And so my security background said, this is important, ID him. So I made sure I ID'd him, and because I knew I would have to tell what did he look like. And then we just looked at each other. It was just, I'm looking at him, and then I finally raised my shoulders and said, you've got to make a decision. And when I did that, this shadow crossed his face. I watched it. I call it evil taking him. And he had to make a choice. His brow furrowed very deeply. He got very angry. And then he made the decision. I watched him pull the trigger. I watched the blast come out and actually followed it as it hit my shoulder.
You were told by the Holy Spirit as you stood there to stand still.
Indeed.
To just stay where you were. Because you obeyed and followed that, because you recognized it as the voice of God, you were spared. Had you been an inch and a half over,
I'd be dead.
You'd be dead. Tell me about your injuries.
So the medical community was amazed that I was alive. I had one orthopedic surgeon bring me grafts of your body, your arm, to prove to me that I should be dead or have lost my arm. And that's when I learned the miracle of why God had me stand still. He put both the shooter and I in exactly the place where he knew that I would live so that I could serve his purpose. So he shot me in the 1.5 inch in your arm, in your upper arm, just below your shoulder, where you can be wounded and not die or lose your arm.
You know, God, when his children are involved, he's in it all. And it all has meaning, sometimes even when we can't possibly understand it. What do you feel like God saved you for in this?
It's multiple. He's made me this warrior who's unafraid to speak into a culture about mental illness, about how we deal with each other, how we treat each other, the divisiveness that's going on in our culture. In the book I talk about, when I looked at him, he reminds me of the mental illness of our culture. Our culture has walked away, or parts of it have walked away from civility.
Yes.
And how we treat each other. And God tells us through Christ it's relational, right? Grace is relational. And the man I saw in the stairwell had lost his value. He had nothing to dig into. And that's what faith gives us. He is the example, as I believe every shooter is hopelessness. When you don't have any grounding to dig into, when you're struggling, you become hopeless. And that's what God tells us. And he allowed me to see hopelessness. The other thing he wanted me to say about this man was the man was not evil. He was at a place where evil could use him. And that's a different conversation than we talk about when we talk about the shooter. We also don't talk about the shooter's families. His mother, and why I prayed for her when I was on the roof, is she lost a son in the most horrible way to lose a child, killing other people. And so the burden upon her and her family is intense, right? So they deserve our prayers and support. He was not an evil man. He was allowing evil to use him. So that's part of my message.
And that message, you are now retired from what you were doing then.
I am.
But God has opened doors for speaking engagements for you to talk about this book. I can't think of a time in our culture where we more needed to hear from someone who actually walked through this. And that's what Standing Still is all about. It's Jennifer's book, Standing Still in a Culture of Mass Shootings. She has so much to say. It's well worth your read. It's available now wherever books are sold. Thank you so much.
You're so very welcome.
Wonderful to have
I've enjoyed meeting you.
You too. I'm glad to see you're healthy and well. Bless you.
I am indeed.
Thank you.